connect and talk about this very important topic for our community. As you said, I'm the president of the Sickle Cell Disease Association of Canada. And as you know, the majority of people affected by this genetic condition are of African descent. And some of them are from the Middle East and from also the Caribbeans, most of them. So we are considered visible minorities here, called visible minorities. As such, we also are a group of people who are underserved. And then when it comes first to any kind of service, but specifically when it comes to health, which I'm going to be talking about, it makes the situation worse. I have a question, Yvette. I'm wondering, can I share my screen? Is it possible?
Try. If not, I will have to put you co-host.
Let me see.
It should be open for you to share it. Yes, we can see.
Can everyone see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So instead of talking that, I just want to show you specific things. So as you know, sickle cell disease is a blood disorder, is a genetic inherited blood disorder. So that affects the production of red blood cells in your body. So what happens technically for somebody living with sickle cell disease, you and I who are healthy are gonna live, eat, sleep, rest, and generate our own blood. For them, they have issues doing that. And even when they do, their red blood cells don't last long. It's 120 days for healthy red blood cells, but for them, it's sometimes 10 to 12 days, which then it's a chronic condition that requires healthcare constantly. They need medication for the rest of their lives. They also need sometimes blood transfusion or blood exchange. But most importantly, it comes with very painful crises that takes them very often to the hospital through the ER and long hospital stays. And the reality is that less than, I would say, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, sickle cell diagnostic was a death sentence. But now, with the progress that we see in our healthcare system all over the world, people are living longer. But they're living longer, but the quality of life is not there. I would say even when they say they're living longer, do you know what the life expectancy is in Canada? The minimum is 79 to 89 years old for people, for every Canadian. But for sickle cell disease is 50 years old. So think about it. If you know anybody who is 50 in your entourage, think of how strong they are. Think about maybe for some people, that's the time they're really enjoying their life, their careers, their families. Kids are growing up and they want to start traveling or start a new business, a new job. And for sickle cell people, that's the age where people are dying. So if they have a family, you know that the trauma in the community is huge. And also these people are not able to retain a job because they get sick very often. So most of the time, they don't have a higher education. And also if they do, when they get a job, they're not able to keep the job. Now, when we talk here about race, I'm going to show you. So for sickle cell disease, for over 40 years in Canada, we've only have supportive care. What do I call supportive care? We only had one drug, which is called hydroxyurea, all blood transfusion. Now I'm going to show you here with an example that you can see. So when you look at this graph here, this is the only drug that we have for sickle cell disease. It was here. When you look here in 1988, that's when they started using the drug in the US. And then it took 8 years for us to get that drug in Canada, 1995. So finally we had hydroxyurea. And then we go 2000, 2005, 2010, 15, nothing. One drug for every treatment. Think about a headache. When you have a headache, if you walk into a pharmacy, how many options do you have? Now take it further. If you have cancer today, any type of cancer, the minimum option that they will put for you on the table is between 3 and 5. But for sickle cell, we only have one drug. And this drug was a cancer drug. It was a drug used to treat leukemia, and they realized that it can help with sickle cell, and they start using it. So it was not a drug specifically made for sickle cell disease. Now we move. Next slide. We come here. All these years, we only have one drug. Then we get to 2019 here. What happened in the US? US is blue, Canada is red. US, 3 new drugs. And those drugs with research were specifically dedicated for sickle cell disease. They got it. Canada, 0. We are in 2021, going on 2022. We don't have those drugs. So I'm gonna stop my screen sharing here and speak to you about it. So what happens now when you are left with one treatment option and the second one is blood transfusion? If hydroxyurea doesn't work for you, you're gonna be then put on permanent blood transfusion. And that's the case for my son. My son goes every 8 weeks to the hospital to get the blood exchange. And that's the only thing keeping him alive today. And he relies on the generosity of people we know nothing about, because it goes through the blood system here in Quebec, or in the rest of Canada is Canadian Blood Services. And I always wonder what happens if one day they don't find the blood that he needs. What happens to him? And hydroxyurea doesn't work for him. And that's the reality of people living with sickle cell disease in Canada. Now, to add to that, I spoke about the painful crisis. What happened with the painful crisis? They go to the ER. And to treat a sickle cell crisis now, the pain protocol management is with opioid. And when you talk about opioid, you talk about how drugs. So what happened when they come to the ER, these people are treated as drug seekers, not as patients. They look at them as, oh, look at him, he just wants a drug. He's not sick, he's not in pain. So their pain get dismissed. So we always have to stand and advocate for them. And I like also always to share example to show you how harmful this can be. Because when the whole community is stigmatized and the label has drug seekers, sometimes it can be a life-threatening things for them. On November 11, my son went into a crisis in the early hours of November 11. He doesn't live with me. He's independent, and he works in a pharmacy. He lives in his own house. But he called me around 6 a.m. and I went to get him. I thought maybe, okay, it's a normal crisis. He's gonna come spend the weekend with us and then go back to work. He came to my house 2 hours after he was on the floor screaming. I called 911. The ambulance came maybe, I would say 30 minutes after. When they got here, I told them, I said, he has sickle cell. You can only take him in one hospital because that's the only hospital where there is a physician who knows the disease, who can treat him. Problem number one, not every hospital can treat a sickle cell patient in Canada. What happened? They are just all put in prison cages for their care, meaning that if tomorrow he gets a job in any other province, he's gonna have to check if there is a physician there who can treat him, or he has to stay in Montreal, either he likes it or not. Then I had to
Supper. This consisted of 2 slices of dried bread with jam, fried potatoes, no meat, and a bun baked by the girls that we called horse buns. And every other night during the summertime, an apple. The manner in which the food was prepared did not encourage overeating. The diet remained constant and hunger was never absent. I would estimate here that 90% of the children were suffering from diet deficiency, and this was evident by the number of boils, warts, and general malaise that existed within the school population. I've seen Indian children eating from the swill barrel, picking out soggy bits of food that were intended for the pigs. At the mush hole, we had several hundred laying hens of the white leghorn variety. We received a yearly ration of 1 egg apiece. This was on Easter Sunday morning. The whole milk was separated in the barn, and the cream was then sold to a local dairy firm, the Mohawk Creamery, which I believe is still in business.
So I want you to know that sickle cell disease is a health issue that affects a majority of Black people. And in Canada, sickle cell disease is a public health emergency. We need to come together as a community so that we can change things. And that's why our organization was funded. We are the national umbrella for sickle cell disease. And we also have provincial groups who are working to support the patient. We came together and we went to Ottawa and we demanded to have more resources allocated to sickle cell, because you have to bring a solution when you go. And our solution is that there has to be more funding allocated for sickle cell. There has to be more physicians trained for sickle cell. And then also we have to make Canada sickle cell friendly. If every single person, starting with the healthcare provider, the educators, even the teachers have to know, but the community, people who are gonna hire these these people are not going to consider them as drug seekers or label them as lazy people because they have permanent and chronic anemia, then we can together change the lives of these people who are affected. And I know that every single Black person standing will tell me, I know somebody who died from sickle cell, but yet we don't take action. And action speaks louder, you know, and we have to come together and work as one. And that's why I always say the first thing that we have to do is to raise our voices and speak up. When you are silent, your needs are not counted. When you are silent, nobody can come and defend you. When you are silent, nobody knows what you're going through. So I always urge patients and families to share their stories, and I also bring the community together. That's why I never miss an opportunity to come and talk and tell you. When you hear sickle cell meetings, when you hear sickle cell fundraising, when you hear sickle cell conference, please show up. Thank you. I'll stop here to allow other people to talk, and I can answer the questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Biba, for this presentation. Definitely you are speaking from your heart, from the experience that you have as a mother of a child who has sickle cell disease. So I know the audience will have some questions. Now we will move forward to our next panelist. Oops, sorry. Sorry about the noise, my phone. Our next panelist is Alice Phipps. Alice is a first-generation Canadian from Edmonton, Alberta, whose family hails from Grenada and St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. She was a member of Junior Chamber International, JCI Edmonton, from 2010 to 2018. In that time, she has been a local director, a local vice president, a local president, a Prairie Region effective speaking champion, a national effective speaking chair, and awarded the honor of being a JCI senator. She has an educational background in communications and has worked in several industries ranging from software to insurance. She's currently employed by Alberta Pension Services Corporation, working as an Alberta public sector pension administrator. Please welcome Alice Phipps. Alice, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I think I'm just going to talk about my personal experiences, and I just want to also mention that I am a sickle cell trait carrier. I do know the local specialist out here in Edmonton. And yeah, I mean, 2 guys to handle all of that, it's pretty intense. So I do, you know, it is a topic that affects my life and the life of my family. So yeah, it was a great understanding what the treatments or lack of treatments are available for people who are going into sickle cell crisis. So for me, I grew up here in Edmonton. I was born in 1978. And at the time, the Black community here was fairly small, small enough that people would see me as a kid and go, "Oh, are you so-and-so's family?" But it's not like that anymore. There's a very large community of Caribbean and African immigrants in Edmonton now. Alberta, strangely enough, is one of the provinces that accept the most refugees in Canada. I don't think a lot of people realize that because Alberta has kind of a reputation of being full of white cowboys. And it is full of white cowboys, but there is a lot of different communities living out here. And for the most part, there's not a lot of clashes between different cultural groups. But like everywhere else, we do have some issues between the Black community, the Indigenous community, and the police force. When everything went down in the States during COVID, and it kind of came to a boiling point, because we know that as a Black community member that these things are not new. They were happening for a very long time. And part of your upbringing with Black parents is them warning you that sometimes the police are not going to be there to protect you, and that you have to do all the things that your non-Black friends don't necessarily have to do to keep yourself safe. And I don't think a lot of people realize that outside of the Black community, that it's something that you grow up thinking about, that if you're in trouble, going to the police might not be in your best interest. I don't think it's anything that they think about, unless they're part of those groups where you have to be careful about which police officer comes to help you out. And one of the stories I like to tell my friends is that a few years ago, I went to a Christmas party around this time of year with my cousins, and we're all over 30. We're all professionals. We had nurses, social workers, teachers, and we're in this house celebrating the Christmas season, and someone made a noise complaint. So the police arrive, and my cousin's ex-football player husband opens the door. And I suppose his size made them very nervous, because next thing we know, they're yelling. So we send all the female people to the front of the room, and all the guys go into the back. And we're trying to calm them down. And then one of the police officers threatened to pepper spray the house. So again, we're not teenagers in this house. We're all adults with professional careers. And this white cop is threatening to pepper spray a holiday party. And then he calls for backup. So now my tiny little cousin, who's like 5'3" and nothing, is outside, because now we don't want the door open because they've threatened us with pepper spray, and trying to calm down this cop. The rest of the cops show up, and it gets de-escalated, obviously, because now these two cops are talking to a 5'3" little woman and saying how they're feeling threatened. But it's just stories like that that just bring home the disparity. I feel like if there was a Christmas party, holiday party with a whole bunch of white people and there was a noise complaint, I don't think the cops would have threatened to pepper spray the room. I could be wrong, but I strongly feel that wouldn't be the case. So that's my personal experience. And I have little tiny ones throughout my entire life, whether that's being followed around the mall by the mall police waiting for me to shoplift, or, eyes on you in a place where people are thinking, oh, you shouldn't be here. You're not the right color. And yeah, I don't think some of my friends, again, because I was born here in a certain time period and all my classmates for the most part was, you know, or were white. Every class had like one Black person and one Asian person, or one Asian person and one ethnically ambiguous person. And everyone else was white, especially in the Catholic school system for a while there. So I don't think it's hard when your experience growing up is different from everyone else's and they don't see it. They don't see it unless they happen to be with you when something like that happens. And it's, you know, it's really difficult. Last year, this year, I've spoken more about identity politics than I have in college when I was talking about cultural implications of art and that sort of thing. So all I can do is encourage people to, you know, learn to read, to listen. And yeah, so that's just my personal experience. I am super happy that Yvette has broken the glass ceiling here in JCI Canada by becoming our national president. That made me super happy because I was the first Black local president here in Edmonton. And so, yeah, it just, the more we can reflect as an organization, the community that we live in, I think the more diverse our organization can become, like truly multicultural. Because right now, when you go into a room, and, you know, when I joined JCI, everyone was super friendly and super amazing and no criticism at all. But when you go into a room and you're the only non-white face, it is so intimidating. And I mean, it's not even like I wasn't used to being that only tanned face in a room, but I think the more inclusive that we can be for people, not only culturally, religious, but also from professional backgrounds. It kind of disturbed me when I joined that they made it sound like you had to own your own business or be wanting to go into politics to be part of this organization. And that's not exactly what we're about. So again, I think when we're talking about diversity, it has to be, we need to be open to everyone. So that's all I have to say. Thanks, Yvette.
Thank you so much, Alice, for sharing your experience with us. Definitely, there is something when you are the only Black person in a room, despite the confidence that you have, you will still feel that there's something missing. So I definitely agree with you that it is important to welcome diversity, but also to listen and to be ready to read. So as we move forward to our next panel, I will remind you to keep, if you have questions, to write them down. We will open the floor for questions. This is the time they are sharing, but of course we would like to elaborate a little bit more into more questions. So our next panelist is Agnès Quito-Afum. Agnès is a people person and enjoys corporate interactions. Agnès enjoys working with people from diverse backgrounds and experiences in hopes of working through solutions together. With a profound passion for resolving disputes and a deep understanding of equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as gender-based violence, gender-based analysis plus. Agnes joined the Defense Visible Minority Advisory Group in 2017 and has been an active member since. With this experience, she established key KA dispute resolution services, bleeding both of her passions, resolving disputes, and equity, diversity, and inclusion. KA Dispute Resolution Services offers a vast range of dispute resolution services, which are categorized into three main sections: mediation, arbitration, and EDI and workshops. Agnes, we welcome you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening from where I am sitting to everybody. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to recognize the incident and the pain and hurt that the people of Kentucky are going through at this moment, and to say I acknowledge your pain and I stand with you in solidarity. Today, I will be speaking and sharing my experiences and my lived experiences from a sports perspective, equity, diversity, and inclusion from a sports perspective in the Black community. To begin, sports has the power to change the world. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else can. Sports can awaken hope where there was previously only despair. Sports speaks to people in a language that they can understand. And that is taken from Nelson Mandela when he expressed the need and the importance for equity and inclusion in sports. For me personally, diversity and inclusion in sports promotes creativity, uniqueness, different and differing perspectives, and it brings about new opportunities. And I believe that the new opportunities is where it's big for me when it comes to my community, the opportunities. I will go about this in a different way. I will speak to you about what it's like when there's inequity, when there's inequality and inequity in sports, and also highlight my experiences, but also start telling you where I started reconciling it from to answer the other portion of this, this talk is what can we do? So this is what inequality for an athlete looks like from a sport, from an athlete standpoint. And this is what it can do. Inequality in sports, especially from a gender-based, there is unequal sports coverage, mainly because a lot of people believe that, oh, from the gender side of it, women's sports are not as engaging, it's not as exciting, they can't be that good. And I will speak again from the perspective using boxing, because it is the sport that I know, it is the sport that I love, and there's nothing I can do about it. It is engraved in my bones. It can't be that good. I mean, how could a woman possibly be a boxer and be good at that art? It's not possible. So as such, we see it manifest when a woman and a man are competing for space in the media. The woman does not get the space they deserve. And a lot of it is leading to the already the variables that I've already mentioned. Another way inequality can manifest is through payment. Where it can manifest as financial hardship. A lot of athletes within our community, again, from the boxing perspective, because that is what I know, end up thinking, am I able to pay for that membership? Am I able to pay for the gear that I need? If I am fighting or if I am going against somebody from Poland for a title, that person's main job is to train. They are paid for this. For me, this is a side hustle. And we already see the difference in opportunity and difference when it comes to the skill and the development of the skill. One person, it's their main duty. While for my community, I feel that a lot of the times it's a hobby. And it's just, I'm really good at my hobby. A lot of the times people are worried about food and hotel costs. How am I able to pay for that? I mean, I'm already sometimes having a hard time paying for my everyday living. How am I going to afford this on top of it? International tournaments are a battle of its own. And we see a lot of these in the minority communities. I mean, we could apply the same theory in a majority of the sports. We could apply it to soccer. Recently, a lot of spotlight has been put on hockey. We could apply the same theories and the same financial inequalities and lack of opportunity in hockey and junior hockey for that matter for the Black community. When this happens, as an athlete, there is a lack of motivation. Why am I trying so hard? I mean, I could only get so far. I don't have the means to actually make it. And I can't ride on my skills for that long. And then sometimes it's also limiting and it cuts careers short. Bringing in my own personal experiences, I was on the Canadian national team. I started boxing at quite a young age. That alone brought issues of its own within my own community and the outside community. Not only was I boxing at a young age, I was an African and I was female. So I had all those different, I had all of that to compete with when it comes to my counterparts or my Caucasian counterparts. I was very quickly identified to have a skill. So within 6 months of starting to box, I got onto the national team. I worked very hard. I also played soccer and I worked very hard. Sometimes you'd have to work that much harder for a fight to be called in your favor. You have to work that much harder. I was happy and I was prepared, and because I love the sport, I was willing to do that. And I did very well. I maintained my spot on the national team for 8 consecutive years. I was actually introduced to equity, diversity, and inclusion from my Irish coaches because they could relate. They could relate to moving here, not being able to have children, and being Irish as the time they moved here, how society saw Irish people. So my struggles that I couldn't identify at the time, or I couldn't name, they were able to identify through their own experiences. And as such, they took me under their belts and they really mentored me. They were not going to keep me naive. They brought it to my attention, but also made me believe that they were going to protect me. I felt protected when I was with them. I felt protected, and I didn't have to worry about being Black and being a Black female who is good at my sport and not having to justify why I'm good to anybody. And they did that very well. But outside of their circle and outside of their triangle, that protection was not there. I faced a lot of comments. I faced a lot of questioning of my abilities. And I faced a lot of questions and doubt about where I need to be or if I belonged on the team. One such incident occurred when we were going to the World Championships. And a majority of my white counterparts had their international trip paid for, but Agnes had to make her own way under the understanding that if I medal, my cost would be reimbursed. But I had one of the best records on the team, as at that time I had 80 fights, and out of the 80 fights, I had won 68 of those fights. So it wasn't a viable excuse, but it was used nonetheless. That is okay. We went to the Worlds and we lost on a very controversial decision. How did that make me feel from an equity, diversity, and inclusion perspective? It made me feel that my talents were discounted. All the time that I had put in, everything that I had worked for, because of somebody's lack of understanding and because of somebody's poor judgment, has basically taken that away. How does it relate to opportunity? It relates to opportunity in the sense that that money that would have been reimbursed would have been university tuition to further my education. It would have been, I could have used that resource in a different way. And then it made me it made me think. But you know, sometimes I adopt the position that it depends on how and the perspective at which you come to the conversation with, and how well are you going to arm yourself to engage in this conversation. And I'm blessed to have had the group that I had around me at that point. So when I came back from the Worlds, and that was the second time that had happened, mind you. So when I came back from the Worlds, I said to myself, there is an expiration date to you in this sport. Already people believe you shouldn't be in this sport. So what are you going to do? And then I did my own case study, and I looked at all the other athletes who belonged to my community, who were great. Some were Olympians, some were boxing with Lennox Lewis, and they were amazing. And I could actually, Biba, one of my teammates is the likes of Jean Pascal. We were on the same team together. We go way back. And Stevenson Adonis, and those were the people that we were in the same group with. So I used some of them and our older generation to do a case study. And one of the things that I found for myself was, yes, we are hailed and we are made to feel great when we are in our own bubble, when we're in our comfort zones. However, once that expiration date hits and we go back into society, there's nothing left for anybody to do. Is that the kind of life that I want? And I stated to myself, no. So I walked into the gym. We were getting ready to go to France and Italy. And I stated to my coach, and I thanked them for the opportunity for the past 20 years. And I told them, however, today is my last day as a boxer. I am resigning undefeated, and I choose to go to school. So it was a tough decision. I walked away from everything I know. My identity was forged in that. Everybody knew me as Agnes the boxer. And it took a lot for me to intentionally work and move away from that identity. Because again, I wanted people outside of my community to know that don't categorize me to that. I am more than that. I am capable of doing more than just boxing. If you didn't want to give me the opportunities, I will go out there and I'll forge those opportunities for myself. So I moved away from the sports, dove into education, advanced my career in the military. And here's to answer the question of this, this conference is, what can we do to be better? I came back to the sport. I came back to the sport to meet the same people that were not giving me the opportunities, to provide them opportunities, to provide them opportunities in the capacity as a legal consultant for them, as a mediator, as an arbitrator, and also to offer them equity, diversity, and inclusion workshops and how athletes feel when we take opportunities away. And I mean, I had to really, it was mentally draining. Mental health really suffered, because at that point, you really know that you were the token. Tokenism was at play. And not only were you a token, you were a token to enrich somebody else's national pride. When you're on a sports team and you're at a national level, your main goal, whether you want to believe it or not, is that you are there as national, for the national front, to engage national pride, to make people feel good about being Canadian. However, if you belong to a visible minority group and you make a mistake when your human side shows and you show your weaknesses and you do not perform as well, then it's quite an idiom. And it goes to speak to the inclusion portion of this conversation, is that you are quickly reminded that you no longer belong. You are no longer a part of this conversation. You are there to pull us all back together as a Canadian, but you made us lose and you're not Canadian, you are Ghanaian. So it's quite interesting. And the sports aspect of it is multifaceted. I mean, before I land my plane by saying we see this happen quite a bit in sports where people are taunted, made called monkeys through symbolism, through different phallics and so on and so forth, you name it, all because they broke and they showed their human side by, not carrying forth and not being able to uphold the national identity character that has been placed upon them, the national identity weight that has been placed upon their shoulders. And quite frequently, this happens to the younger generation. So I'm really passionate about this. And just equity, diversity, and inclusion as a whole. And I can't speak enough about it to state that this conversation we can't do. And I told the department that I work for is, yes, it's great the government wants to talk about this, but we can't do equity, diversity, and inclusion by doing giving people videos to watch. You can't do this without the hard, honest, open dialogue, without the conversation. And it's something that I really believe, and any opportunity I get, I will steer a conversation into that direction just to plant those seeds, because that's all for me, that's all I need to do, plant it and wait for the watering and the germination process to begin. I land my plane. I'm Agnes, and I am very happy to take your questions. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Agnes, for sharing with us and with passion as well your experience in the sports field, and how inequities, the lack of opportunities are evident when you are a Black person. So I could see in the panel a lot of excitement from the other speakers, and at this time I'm pretty sure that we have the same in the audience. So I will leave the floor to my colleague here, Ibrahim Diomande, who's the Executive Vice President current for JCI Ottawa. You will be leading the Q&A. So to the audience, feel free to ask you questions when the time will come for you. But in the meantime, I'm going to leave the floor to Ibrahim, and thank you again.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you for introducing me. And thank you, our dear panelists, for those great presentations. I was very emotional, and I'm sure that all the participants have many questions for you. But before, I have prepared some questions that I wanted to ask you before going to the participants. So I have 3 questions for Biba Tinga about the sickle cell disease first. So the first question is, how can sickle cell disease becomes a public? How can it be a public health emergency in Canada?
It becomes so when we are letting people with sickle cell die at a young age. It becomes so when they are stigmatized when they are trying to access care as Canadian. Okay. It becomes so when they are not counted in any, might it be provincial or federal program, because for us to get all the resources that we need a nurse, a dedicated nurse, we need a comprehensive care clinic. We need our government to just, allocate some resources, in the budget for us to get it. So when all those needs are not met, then we have a crisis. And that crisis is that our people in our community are left, for themselves. They are not, they're not even being attended to in the way that other Canadians are. So there are 2 issues. First of all, when as a Black person, you feel like, okay, this is done to me because of my race, right? Like what my 2 colleagues have been sharing now. Your experience are based on your race. But imagine that you have to go through that in your everyday life, but then you add to that that when you are going to seek care to stay alive, you know, again, there is a second component to that, is that the resources are not even allocated to you for you to be able to stay alive. Then that's when we talk about an emergency. And we need to change that. We need to change that narrative in Canada quickly.
Okay, I understand. So I can say that, do you think that racism affect the healthcare of those people with this disease?
Of course, there is racism indeed. And I remember one day, the first time I really, because, you know, we always think about it, we see it as parents and we hear all those stories. And then I remember in 2015, we went to Ottawa and we were sitting in the office of one senator, just trying to educate them about sickle cell disease. And we had a group, there was one parent, one physician, a hematologist from Ottawa region, and then there was an advocate. So the three of us, I was supposed to bring the parents' perspective. He was supposed to bring the healthcare provider perspective. And that physician sat there and looked at the senator and said, I am a physician. I treat kids with diseases like cancer, sickle cell, you know, that's my job. He said, but what I'm being given to treat a sickle cell patient is not enough for me to take care of them and to keep them alive compared to what I'm given by the same hospital to treat a child with another blood disorder. So a child has diabetes, he goes to the hospital, he has more resources, everything he needs to be able to go to school. Listen, they even have this program where the teachers are gonna come to the hospital and teach them so that they don't miss school. They're gonna have the homework, they're gonna have the nurse calling, talking to the parents, what to do, how to feed them. We don't have that for sickle cell. If your parents are not educated or they cannot stand for you and advocate for you, you are gonna be failing in school. So with no education, you can go further in this society. So your future is already, you know, jeopardized. So yes, that's racism. That's racism.
Okay. So what proposition do your organization have to reduce the impact of the racism against these people?
Wow. You know, I like to listen to people who have been there before us. It's always good to learn from people if they are older than you or even if they are younger than you. And I will share with you that one day I was in a meeting in Toronto and Honorable Jean Augustine was speaking and she said something that stayed with me for years. She said to us, you Black youth, I gotta tell you something. You cannot be outside of the tent and complain about what's happening inside of the tent. You gotta be there. You got to be part of the work that is being done for you to change things. So that's when, you know what, I become more than a warrior mom, as they call us. I also become an advocate. And I said, okay, I'm going to put time. I'm going to go into the organization. I'm going to advocate. I'm going to do all this. And I've been doing it for a long time. But guess what? Recently, another young person was speaking, Sandy Hudson. Sandy Houston is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter movement, right? She's a Canadian, know her. And she was speaking at a conference less than 2 months ago. And she said something and it shifted, well, it didn't shift, but it added to what I learned from Honorable Jean Augustine. She says this exactly. She said that sometimes you need to destroy the table and create a whole brand new one. That was powerful because all this time, what have we tried to go to the table that has been like discriminating us to try and push and sit there, and sometimes they don't give us a chance. So when they don't give us a chair, what do? Because I was keeping what Jean Augustine said, I will bring my own chair and I will sit and I will make us, but then when I see a meeting, I will put myself there, I will go speak up, but then I will. And then you know what she said, she spoke about the media when Agnes was talking. Every time there is June 19, I have to send 150 letters to all the medias across Canada to get one of them to talk about June 19. But any other thing happen in Canada, the medias will run and take television, you know, written media, radio, everything to cover that incident. But for sickle cell, it's silent. So that girl's changed the perspective. I'm like, So we are in a new era now. We are not going to run after people and tell them to change things for us. Today, we created the table here. We don't have to destroy the other one because, you know, that was kind of, but you know what? Let's sit here and let's come together. We have the intelligence, we have the expertise, we have the resources, we have everything we need to come together. And in this new era where they said Black Lives Matter, where they're talking about, you know, diversity and equity in everything in Canada, we should get the resources allocated to us to do the job. We should be able, we have the physician for sickle cell, we have the nurses in the community. Most nurses are from our community. We have the teachers, we have the volunteers. Why can't we do it ourselves? Research has to be done. Let's do it ourselves. Let's educate ourselves. I love it when Alice said, I have sickle cell trait. Do you know what it tells me? That's a young, educated Black woman standing there telling you, I know I have the trait. So when comes time to make any decision, I know when I go to seek care, I will tell them, yes, I have a headache, but I have sickle cell trait. You got to look at me with that to care for me, because that can be something triggering, you know, more symptoms for me. So that education, let's do it together for ourselves. That's the one thing. And also let's continue to advocate, because we are Canadian and it's the responsibility of our government to care for us as any other Canadian. We have to speak up, raise our voices for resources to be given to us to do so. But most importantly, let's report. I always tell the patient, when you go to the hospital, they treat you badly and you come home and you cry, you don't speak up. When you come home and you tell your mom and your mom just say, don't mind them, they're racist, and you just leave it there, it's not enough. We are in a country where, as you know, Yvette said, we have a system, we have laws to protect you. Follow the process. Every time you're being discriminated, report it, stand up and go and say, I have a complaint, you know, and interrupt it first. And let me share a little story with you. When my son was leaving the hospital that day, so the doctor prescribes opioid for him. And the nurse came and said, well, you're leaving today, you're going home. But by the time your mom pick you up, put you in the car, take you home, and I don't know if you have stairs at your house, you're gonna have pain. So the doctor prescribes opioid for you to take before you leave the hospital, okay? So he said, but I'm not gonna give it to you. So if you can take the pain, I will just give you Tylenol and you can go home. And my son was just sitting like this and looking at him. And this is a 33-year-old man, but he didn't speak up. And I just stopped. I interrupted right away. And I said to him, excuse me, has the doctor prescribed the opioid? I said, so why are you not giving it to him? Because he has sickle cell and you think he's a drug addict? Give him the drug. And he said, well, he's the patient. I said to my son, request the drug, request it. And he did. And he went, got it, gave it to him. He took it and we went home. When we got in the car, I said to him, I swear, if you weren't coming out of surgery today, I will snap your neck. Next time, speak up. Speak up. And, you know, I interrupted. Then I questioned the guy. That's the second thing you do. Then I educated him after. I said, you shouldn't do that because he's in pain, you know. And it doesn't matter if it was another patient without sickle cell, you will give him the drug. So why will you decide to deny him that right? You know, and I told my son, the fourth part of this was you were supposed to echo what I did. If you are standing, somebody speaks up, you have to echo what they say, to say, I was here, it's right, what you did is wrong. And I was here, I'm witness. They will stop if all of us do the same thing. Interrupt, question, educate, and echo if you can. Be the second or the third voice to support what's being done. If we all come together, we don't look away. Everywhere I stand, I can be in a store. If something wrong is happening, sometimes I just come and stand and I watch. When somebody is standing there, the person who is a victim, who is speaking up, is going to have the strength. I got support. I got you. Exactly. And I'm a witness. If you need to go to court tomorrow, I was there. I can testify, you know, so we have to do that. So this is one, because it's healthcare, you need to report what's being done to you. That's the only way. And last but not least, I'm talking to the JCs here, and they are 18 to 40, right? That's the age range. But let me tell you something. It's okay to go and ask for what we deserve to have. But guess what? You got to do stuff for yourself. And then when you're helping yourself, then you can tell people, I want you to join me. One of the things that I said at the beginning, sickle cell has 2 treatment options, hydroxyurea and blood. Blood is easy. We all can donate blood. And then I will tell you something. They don't want any blood. when somebody has sickle cell, if the person is Black, we need phenotyped blood that comes from Black people. And all of the time they tell us we don't have enough blood to treat the patient. And as I told you, my son relies on 10 people in Canada I know nothing about who always donate blood because it's anonymous. But every day I wake up sometimes sweating. I said, what if one of them move out of Canada or dies? Who's going to replace them? We need to continue to build lifelong donors. So this second generation here is the one that's going to change the things. When every Black person becomes a lifelong donor, and we go and we tell the government, look, you guys don't get us the new drugs, but we are doing it ourselves. Our blood is free. We are regenerating. So we're donating blood. Every single Black person is donating blood. But now that's not enough. We need medication. Those medications, bring them to Canada. They can't deny us that. So we need it needs to start within the community also. We need to be supporting the causes that affect us. And then we can speak up more loudly. We raise our voices together. And unity, we need to be united. Today, I want to go and join Agnes in whatever she's doing that is for sport, bring young kids, because I know so many of them are talented, but we tell them, you have to go to school and be a doctor or a lawyer. What sports? But when I look at those people being very rich in America, thanks to sport, I'm like, we've missed something in the Black community. We need to change that thinking. So whatever you can do to bring the resources and yet let our young Black athletes, be able to succeed in sport, let's do it, And I am so proud when I see the second generation has athletes. You are what we're looking for. You are the fusion of what we brought from abroad and then what is here. So you are those Afro-Canadians that have this dual culture in them and take what's good in both communities and then create somebody that nobody can equal. Because this what is in you, I see it also in my kids. Sometimes my daughter is on the phone, I go and open the door. Do you know why? Because I think there is a white woman speaking in my house. Seriously. Because I'm like, we are in Quebec, that Quebec French. I will see her, she's talking to a friend. But guess what? The minute she steps out of the room, she changes her French. She talks to me. So she knows. Yeah. She knows. She sees my friends when they are white. She will call them by their first name. The minute a Black woman gets in the house, it's auntie. So that is our, it's part of our culture. So we need to continue to promote that and be proud of it and carry ourselves and make sure that, we make Canada a diverse community where they know what we eat. Have you seen the Asian community? Wherever you go, there is a Chinese restaurant. And one day I was sitting in a Chinese restaurant. I was in Washington, D.C. And you know what? I don't know how to eat with those sticks. I never learned. I just refused. Then I look around the restaurant, all the white people were just very much using it. But I have white friends, a lot of them, and they love coming to my house. Why? Because they love the African cooking. But I tell them, the chibujen is the Senegalese rice with vegetable. I said, we eat it with hands. They go, well, okay, Biba, but can I have a spoon? I'm like, well, when you go to the Chinese restaurant, you don't do that. So why can't you put your hands and do it? Well, it's not the same. So I tell them, well, you know what? It's the same. It's because the Asians were able to kind of impose it because they just live the way they live. If they are outside or inside, they speak their language, they eat their food, they buy with their businesses. That's what we have to start to do. So sickle cell has to become our problem as a community. Wherever you donate to that cause. To sickle cell every year. Look for an organization, donate blood. If there is an event, show up with your kids, wear the t-shirt, say, yes, sickle cell affect my communities. I'm telling you, if they see that all across Canada, they're gonna change.
Yes, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for your great presentation, responding to those questions. We will handle our problem ourselves. We will speak up, we will advocate, and we will educate people as well. We are a little bit short in time. I'm gonna ask one question to the other panelists. To Agnes, in Canada, there are strong human rights laws and systems to address discrimination. From your point of view, how can we enforce the laws and policies with regard to systemic racism toward Black people?
Thank you very much for answering that. So this is actually an area that I have been speaking to other community leaders in Ottawa about and getting started. So we all know about the Human Rights Act, and that is our parent legislation. That is great. However, what the Canadian government is also, if I'm understanding it correctly, doing is that a lot of different departments and a lot of even private sectors are all coming up with their own policies. How are these policies being constructed? What are they looking to? Are they looking to the Human Rights Act? I am a firm believer in actually having legislation solely dedicated to equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And how that could be done is, we know changing the laws is a very long process, but making regulations is not. So for me, I think that it might be beneficial if we what's called wrote in or came up with a regulation under the Human Rights Act solely dedicated to equity, diversity, and inclusion and belonging. This way, the different departments and private businesses who are coming up with their own policies have this regulation now to look to in order for them to regulate it. So it's systematically the same throughout the what's called spectrum. So if I go from Department of Justice to D&D, what's called those regulations and the policies should essentially mirror each other minus the give and takes, because it has its parent legislation to look to, which is rooted. But I think going to the Human Rights Act, it doesn't make it streamlined. It leaves a lot to discretion and everybody is doing everything. So it depends where you go. Your business could have its own policy that is vastly different from mine, although we're all speaking on equity, diversity, and inclusion. So what are we trying to really bring on board, and what are we looking to? Where's our streamline, and where's the cutoff is what I'm saying. And to me, I think regulating it and actually doing it in the lines of equity, diversity, and inclusion regulation, I see it being beneficial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Agnes, for that great response. So by focusing on equity and diversity, we can address more regulated laws and policies in our benefit. Alice, in 2 to 3 minutes, how would you explain to someone who doesn't see systemic racism, who doesn't see that there's a systemic racism and there is white privilege, and he doesn't see how it looks like? How would you explain to that person?
I think the problem with the term white privilege is that there are a lot of white people in the world that don't feel privileged, right? They did not grow up middle class. They were, let's say, low income. So to turn around and tell them that they have privilege just gets their quills up. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about, that sort of thing. So you need to be careful when you're talking about privilege. Maybe talk more about things that are barriers, because they can understand that there are financial barriers to their success. And if you can speak to them from that perspective of what barriers have held them back, if any, then you can then explain what society barriers are working against you on a day-to-day basis. Because it's very hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes to really see how comments and microaggressions can really hurt. Little innocent phrases like, oh, you're well-spoken for a Black person. Whoa, what do you mean for a Black person? Am I well-spoken or am I not well-spoken? Little things like that. If you call people out on it and just make them aware that it kind of hurts, it stings a little bit, then I think you can get through to them and get them to see it from your perspective.
I see. Okay, thank you. We'll take one last question from the public. If someone want to ask a question, just raise your hand, and just one last question if you have some. Let me check. Alice Akineza.
Oh, that was well pronounced. I'm not used to people having it so well done. It was a surprise. Sorry, I'm not used to someone pronouncing my name so well. My name is Alice Akineza. I am also a first-generation immigrant. Now, my parents and my brothers have been in Canada for long enough to know that everything that every one of the speakers have talked about, I've been through it, done it, tried. And sometimes I felt that though I was trying to work through the door to get to the tent and get inside and be part of it, because the system was built the way it was built, my voice was not being heard. So my question is for all the panelists, whoever wants to take it, is as immigrants, because now I'm a mom too. So when I came to Canada, I was a young student, an international student coming in with this big view or lack of knowledge of what Black people were going through on a daily basis in Canada, and having this image that Canada is a very welcoming environment and that everything was going to be well. In French, we say au pays des bisounours. But then I realized that it was not the case. So what I wanted to know, and what are the suggestions? What is it that we need to do to make sure that our next generation understand that though we have barriers and struggles, there is a possibility for us to improve the system. It hurts me when I hear what Biba was talking about, how the system is basically not prepared to properly take care of our children. And it scares me as a mother, because I'm thinking, if my child goes in shock and I don't have a physician that can take care of her, how am I supposed to be a parent? Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
May I shed a little bit of light, just a few? I definitely relate with you, Alice, because I myself, I'm a mother, 3 boys, 3 young boys. And it's been something that I struggle with to educate them and to really get them to be self-aware, and especially be aware of their surroundings. It's a tough job to do, but you have to do it. I see it and I adopt the standpoint that their survival depends on it. But in line with the question you asked, I believe that the power of advocacy is very vital to our community. You will be your children's main advocate. You will be sometimes your children's only advocate. And I'm a believer in teaching them the advocacy skills at a very young age. Some of the things that I do with my boys, and sometimes my husband find it fun, is when they have a disagreement, and trust me, they will fight a lot. When they have a disagreement, we put them through a mini mediation session where you get an opportunity to be heard. And quite frequently yesterday, we did one of them where my youngest was not happy. And I asked, why aren't you happy? He's like, I'm not happy with my settlement agreement. And he had a temper tantrum. So then we started teaching, well, you have to, rather than shouting, stop crying and shouting and come back and renegotiate. So we're teaching them effective communication skills and how to problem solve. And you know what that tells me? Back to Alice's point about the cops showing up to their door, advocacy skills and communication to de-escalate situations and negotiation skills. That is the essence of communication, and that is the essence of what's called activism that yields results. So for me, advocacy and activism is very big, and I've also heard it echoed Biba's great tips that she's given. I've written it down. You will find it on social media. I will quote you, which is interrupt, question, educate, and echo. I hear all of that in by teaching the fundamental and the foundational pieces to communication, which is rooted in advocacy and also rooted in activism. So it's really good. And I teach my boys, try not to be bystanders, and also how to defend themselves when needed, and also through words. So those are some of the things that we do, and it's always a learning experience. I'm still learning. I'm a yeller. I'm trying not to be, but it's something that like you learn and you grow with. And so we believe that teaching them at a young age is really good. And teaching, and you know, one last thing, in our community, we tend to want to raise our children, and especially the African people could relate, is if you are meek, or how is it? If you're meek and docile and so nice and it's respectful, that's good. It doesn't work for this community, because when they go to school and they have to do the presentations, be outspoken and show confidence, the way we raise them and are steeped in our African culture doesn't work. I lend my plane.
Yeah, thank you. Well, can I add something funny to that? Just very short, very briefly.
Just 30 seconds, because we are short of time. Okay.
So I like also, I really read a lot about Buddhism, you know, because that's the only way to calm you when you go through too much stress sometimes. So I look at, you know, and I apply some of the principles. And one of the things that I read somewhere is that the best way to be able to break any rules is to know the rule very well. Otherwise, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to get caught. So I always tell my kids that wherever you go, you cannot just afford to be, you know, careless and carefree. You got to know what are the rules, what are the consequences. Once you know, nobody can fool you, because sometimes when like the police situation happens, if you know you're right, they just don't have the right to step in and come and treat you like that. You're going to tell them, well, you know what? You're going to leave my house. You're going to go and you're going to come back if only you have, you know, the right to get here, because yes. So that's what you need to know your rights. You need to really teach the kids from a young age. If you haven't done, you are under 18, they cannot take you. They have to call a parent. If you are over 18 also, this ABCD, you got the right to make a call. You got to call me. You got, so all that. And there are so many things, like there is one service that is called Legal Shield. I always tell all the parents, I got it at the beginning because I wanted my kids to be protected. I said, if you are in a party, something happened, they accuse you, even if you've.
Bonjour, Yvette. Oui, bonjour. Fazil a des difficultés pour revenir à la page d'accueil, main forum. Can mute.
Okay, I'm gonna bring him back, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
I'm bringing you back, thank you.
Okay,
thank
if
you
you
so
can,
much. Yes, I'm doing it now. Okay, let me see this. Okay, so I will have to close out all the main room. I have to close everything, so just give me a moment. I have to go back to the other room and I will close everything, okay?
Okay, good. Thank you.
So everybody is back? Okay, so close our rooms. Hello. Okay, so people are coming back. C'est où ça?